We're a rural area in New Hampshire. We're a real small school. There's the Common Core coming in, and particularly the idea of speaking and listening in the Common Core is really important in the question formulation technique, because you have to use your voice to voice out the different questions you're going to use, but also the listening that's involved of, okay, my group member just came up with this great question. Am I truly listening to that, and can I add on to that? The value of using question formulation technique, particularly with middle school students, is it really gets them engaged. Middle school kids are great for questions, and this is just a great avenue to give them a little bit of a voice. Today, we're going to be doing the question formulation technique. Okay, you guys are already in groups, and before we get going, I just want to quickly remind you of the rules as we're starting this. Okay, make sure that as you guys are coming up with questions, the scribe who's writing it down, they write the questions exactly as they are asked. You add into that question, but it's slightly different. That becomes a whole new question. Also, make sure you turn any statements into questions, okay? As well as don't take any time to judge or try and answer or praise the questions, okay? We'll have time for that later. The Q focus for you guys is questions that should be asked about American imperialism at the turn of the 20th century.
What country rebelled the most?
Why did the United States want to annex Hawaii?
Yeah.
Okay.
What did Teddy Roosevelt do with the Panama Canal?
The purpose is to get them thinking, to get them questioning, what do I know about the subject? And the great thing about working in groups is that if you come up with a question, that may generate a whole new line of thinking from me. Then I can add an additional question that may generate another line of thinking from somebody else. So right, remember, any question that he says, even if it's slightly different, becomes a whole new question. Does that make sense? So you can add that on. So you really find that questions build upon themselves, which kind of helps expand students' thinking about whatever subject we're covering.
What did Alfred Thayer Mahan do?
There's a lot of what-ifs in social studies and history. So I think the QFT is perfect for that. It gives kids questions, or the opportunity to ask questions that maybe they may not in a normal classroom setting. Your next step, okay, is you're going to go through and mark whether or not it's a closed or open-ended question. Okay.
Who was the biggest anti-imperialist?
Closed.
Yeah, it could be close. Actually, all of these could go either way.
Why is it so important for America to have overseas bases open?
Open.
The purpose is to get students to understand that there are different types of questions, and the way you phrase the question really is going to influence the answer you get.
So we'll put it as closed.
Describe the
You could build off of closed is just.
You can build off of that. Like you could build off of this maybe, because you could say like what country was the most had the biggest refueling station.
Because he wants overseas bases in America. So do you think it should be open or closed? That's what I was thinking. You guys agree with closed?
Yeah.
All right.
What are some advantages closed-ended? What are some advantages of that? Yeah.
Well, mostly because you get so much more information from an open question, and it's harder to answer, and you learn more when it's a challenge.
Okay, so you think open-ended is more difficult and more challenging? Okay. You'll then change one closed-ended question into an open-ended question, and one open-ended question into a closed-ended question.
We could do this one and say who was the most important imperialist and why were they the most important?
How can we make that open? How about why did Alfred Thayer Mahan have the stance that he did on imperialism?
You're going to choose 3 questions you think are the most important for understanding American imperialism at the turn of the 20th century.
Choose that one.
Either 1, 2, or 3, just it needs to be included.
Or I think we should do how did the Spanish-American War affect America? Because that will say what happened.
So you've all gone through, you've all prioritized your questions based off of choosing the 3 most important for understanding American imperialism at the turn of the 20th century. I'd like to know, what did you guys, why did you choose these 3?
Well, I think we chose the three we chose because it kind of describes best on how imperialism was and where it began.
Covers a wide variety of what happened in the imperialistic era.
What the United States wanted that made them imperialistic.
It explained how America gained all of the land they did.
Okay. I'm interested to see where the questions fall. Are they at the beginning, the middle, end? Are they spread out? So, Lucy, where are your priority questions?
Our highest question is one of our questions that we turned from closed to open.
So, one that came closed to open became your number one question?
Yes.
Okay.
Our second one is our 10th question, and our third one is our second.
Our number one question is at the bottom. Our number two question is our 11th question, and our third question is number 3.
Okay. So why do you think they kind of fell in that pattern? Any thoughts on that?
One basic question that just says what it is, and then you add questions like branching off that have more detail and more specific things that you're asking about.
Next steps are, what are we going to do with those questions? You could use that as a research-based question and say, okay, choose your favorite question. Now you're going to go out and do research on that. It could be, in this case, they're actually going to have a 10-question test based off of all of their questions. Here's what I'd like you guys to do. If your group is responsible for coming up with 5 questions that might potentially be on the test, you're going to take your 5, okay, your top 5, and then tomorrow as a class, we're going to sit down and we're going to reduce those down to 10 total questions.
I vote number 14.
14.
What is considered Seward's folly?
Okay.
Who was the biggest anti-imperialist, and why did they think it that way?
These two describe what it's like from United States point of view wanting to get that territory, and what it's like from the natives' view not wanting to be annexed.
How do these questions show that you have learned about American imperialism at the turn of the 20th century? So you guys are going to be answering this reflection on your own. I'll give you 2 minutes to do that. Then you can talk about it amongst your group. You can share, okay? And then we'll share as a class. The whole point of the reflection question is to get students to look back and say, okay, what did we just go through? What was the process? Why did we do it? What did we learn? I think oftentimes middle school students, and probably all students, you could do something, but they don't understand necessarily the why until you take a step back and say, okay, here's why we did it.
How would we know to ask some of the detailed open-ended questions that we did if we did not know about the subject? Questions ask things that you wouldn't be able to ask unless you thoroughly sit down and study the subject. You can ask one main question and then build questions off of that question, and it makes you think more, and you have to pull stuff out of your brain, and when you do that, you have to remember it again, and the more you take it out and remember it again, the deeper it gets into your brain and the more easier it is to remember it.
When I normally use a QFT, it's not usually as a summative assessment. However, I thought this would be a great idea to kind of capture what are the key components that we've learned about in our unit.
You never really know what you know about the subject until you see it from others and your own point of view.
And I think that's one of the great things about using the question formulation technique is it's just automatic engagement for the students because they're interested in it. They get to view their voice, their opinions, their thoughts, and their questions.